Department chairs occupy one of the most complex and consequential leadership roles in higher education. Positioned somewhere between senior or college-level administration and faculty, charged with advancing institutional strategy while stewarding academic culture, shared governance, and day-to-day operations in their unit. Often promoted from the faculty ranks with limited formal preparation, chairs are expected to manage budgets, lead people, navigate conflict, and drive change, all while maintaining scholarly credibility. In this episode of Coaching in Higher Education, we explore the unique challenges and opportunities of coaching department chairpersons and examine how coaches can support these leaders in clarifying role expectations and strengthening leadership capacity while sustaining effectiveness in a role that is both pivotal and profoundly demanding. Hello. I'm Tim Jansa, a leadership and organizational development coach, and your host for Coaching in Higher Education, the go-to podcast for coaching professionals and those interested in coaching at colleges and universities. My guests today are Dr. Whitney Newcomb, Chair of the Department of Education Leadership at Virginia Commonwealth, and Dr. Sara Schley, who serves as Chair of the Department of Educational Practice and Research at Oregon State University. And since they both authored a chapter on coaching department chairs in a recently published volume titled Transformative Coaching for Faculty and Staff in Higher Education, which we explored with two of the editors in episode 1 of this season, I was eager to have them on the show to share their insights into coaching this often underappreciated set of clients. So welcome to the podcast, Sara and Whitney, and thank you for taking the time to talk about your work and your journey as coaches and department leaders.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, likewise. It's a pleasure to be here.
So as I mentioned in the intro, both of you currently serve as department chairs, but as I understand it, your respective journeys into these positions was very different. Would you mind sharing how you became a chair and how this experience has shaped your views on the challenges and opportunities of leading an academic department?
Yeah, sure. I can start. So I was a faculty member at the university that I am currently with for many years, and our department went through a good amount of rotation of chairs, some coming and departing of chairs, and some interims, and then we'd have a hire, and then we'd have a departure, and then we'd have another interim, and so I was asked to become interim chair of the department during a time of fairly solid unrest. And so I did so, just coming right up from faculty ranks and from within the department, and did that for, I guess, about a year, and then ended up applying for the position and just, kind of became permanent, in quotes, chair. And have been chair for coming up on 10 years in a couple of months. And so, that is, I believe different than you'll hear from Sara. And so I think both of us, have unique challenges. And certainly, I think one of the largest challenges that I had was just simply coming in from within, right? Moving from a collegial relationship to one that was more supervisory in nature. And so rebuilding trust or building trust, but from a different perspective. I think also just, thinking about the fact that when I came in, it was during a time of unrest. And so there was not only the building and the rebuilding of trust between myself and faculty, it was also the rebuilding of relationships among the faculty themselves.
Yeah, Whitney, and while our journey here is so different, there's a lot of parallels too. So I came into the department here at Oregon State in a very different way. I was hired externally, so I came in from another place where I had been for 20-something years, and so I had ascended through the ranks, the professorial ranks, at a different place, and then I had a couple years at another place too, in between. I was hired from outside because the college had reorganized itself. It had, I believe there were 14 different programs priorly, so there was a program structure, and they had reorganized into 2 departments. And so they had done a search for a department head for this new department. No one internally wanted to do it. They had done a search, and then it was looking like that search was not going to be successful. So they had figured out a backup plan where 4 of the current faculty in the department were going to serve as a co-chair group, a team, and they were going to sort of rotate and do various pieces of it throughout the year. And then I showed up in the pool for my partner got offered a job here, and then they still had this job open. So I applied for it, and it was a really good fit. Similarly, I came in, and because I was new and didn't have relationships with the individuals in the department at all, I was starting from scratch. There was a lot of trust to be built up again. So that is very similar. Yeah. The other part of trust is that while this was one organizational change that was happening, that the college was moving from separate programs to 2 departments, they were learning how to trust each other, because what formerly were separate programs were now in one group together. And we still are managing quite a bit of change. I came in 2023, and there was a lot of change happening within the college. There was a lot of change happening at the university. We had a new president. We have a new provost. We have, lots of the administration things are changing. We have a new set of curriculum, core ed requirements for students. So there's changes flying at us. And plus, there's all the change that's happening in the world, in the country, in the federal landscape, and the higher ed landscape. Just so much change. People are scared. People are tired. And so that's sort of related to the trust issue, in that there's just a lot going on and people are really stressed. So
yeah, chairs are certainly, I think, at the point where there's a lot of pressure. I think chairs and deans are probably the ones who feel it the most from all kinds of stakeholders, where some other leaders on campus might be a little more isolated. So one thing I'm hearing from both of you is that when you become a chair, you start from scratch in many different ways, even if you are promoted from the inside, because all of a sudden you are no longer part of the faculty, of the group, or of the team that you first were. So there's some rebuilding that has to be done. There's also some identity shifts that certainly have to be happening. And then you mentioned trust, both of you, and I would love to dig into that a little bit. Before we get to that, though, since both of you are coaches, how would you describe to somebody who is not familiar with working with department chairs, how working with that particular group of clients might be a little different than with other clients on campus?
Yeah. I can start. So, I think, depending on what the comparison group is, right, of the clients that we're coaching, chairs are the perfect example of, I think, middle leaders who are responsible up, responsible down, responsible all around, and often are fairly invisible leaders across the university setting. And um, while there may be some that think that position, the people in those positions wield a lot of authority and power, that's not, typically the case. Chairs really have to learn how to lead with influence versus power and authority. So I think those are some things that I think are unique aspects of coaching department chairs. I also think, just depending on what your trajectory is or was to the chair position, some of us may have planned, to take a leadership trajectory. Others of us may not have. For instance, I had not particularly aspired to be a chair. I was very happy as a faculty member. But luckily, my background, my content, my research, and my practice is leadership. So it wasn't a huge step for me to move from a faculty position into a leadership position, just simply because that's my area of expertise and study anyway. But for others, I know that it's a huge pivot for those individuals. They haven't been prepared in any way, shape, or form, and are just kind of left flailing, trying to kind of learn it along the way, build the plane while you're flying it, actually, I think, in a lot of ways. So those are some of the things that I think about. I think chair positions look different across even within universities, but certainly across universities. Some chairs really are essentially faculty with minor leadership roles. They might just be controlling course scheduling or things of that nature, leading department meetings, while other chairs are moved entirely out of faculty positions and become 100% administrative. And so they become responsible for fundraising and building relationships with donors. And so, the position itself can just be vastly different across settings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, also from personal experience, that being a chair is extra difficult because you're dealing with all kinds of people that you're suddenly leading. I mean, you have staff, you have instructors, you have clinical or teaching faculty, you have tenure track faculty, you might have some pure research faculty, graduate students are involved. There's all these things. And Sara, I'm wondering, how does that complicate or make it more challenging, number one, as a chair, but then also as a coach, helping chairs to be better and more effective leaders?
Yeah, that's a huge piece of it. I always consider myself someone who works very well with people across different slices of higher ed. I've done a lot of collaboration across content areas, across colleges, with scientists, with social scientists, with educators, with math, etc. So I was always very attuned to differences in not just ranks but also positions. This was a whole different animal. So, and what it took me a while to realize, and we had a lot of work that was happening within the department, and we pulled in an outside consultant to come help us navigate some things. And he met with different groups several times, and then he came and worked with us at a retreat, and he noticed, and he had talked to me about this before the retreat. He said, I had known that there's often a lot of tension between different lines in like instructors and clinical faculty and tenure line faculty and tenured faculty. There's a lot of difference there. He said, one striking difference is that the instructional faculty and the clinical and practice faculty tend to hear, they do a lot of teaching, they might do some research, but they tend to hear, okay, these things need to happen. Let's delineate the action steps and let's get stuff done. Okay, what do you need me to do? Let's parcel it out and let's all figure out the to-do list and we'll get it done. The tenure line faculty are much more focused on process. And they're frustrating the heck out of each other because they're talking at cross purposes. And so once he talked folks through that, it was like suddenly everyone just got a lot softer and a lot less contentious with each other. I shouldn't say suddenly. So definitely that's a piece of it, is understanding the different mindsets that people have in these different roles and helping folks communicate across these boundaries. So in my mind, that's one of the quirky and built-in pieces of this job that you don't necessarily realize, is that really you're a boundary crosser. You're working from the middle between separate, the dean level and the faculty level. You're working even horizontally with multiple different people in the department who have very different mindsets. And your job really is to do a lot of listening and help people see other perspectives.
Please pardon the interruption. This is your friendly reminder that if you're enjoying today's episode, to please click like and to subscribe to the podcast. Your support is really important to us. Also, please check out the companion website, higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. Thanks so much. And now back to the episode. I'm actually fascinated. Whitney, you said something earlier. You said one thing that you learned was that you have to lead with influence versus power and positionality. That's one of the things. And Sara, what you just mentioned is that all the different, let's call them stakeholders in your department, have very specific and unique needs, also depending on their role and their function and their area of responsibility. Yeah. So what this leads me to is the idea of awareness. So as a coach working with department chairs, I see a lot of chairs come in and they lack awareness not just of their own needs and styles and priorities and preferences, but they also don't quite know how to tickle out the needs of those whom they lead. And one of the things that we often do as coaches is work with assessments. So what are those assessment tools? I mean, I'm a certified DISC practitioner. There's Hogan, there's Myers-Briggs with MBTI, there's Enneagram, and a bunch of others. So how can those assessments potentially help chairs and then also faculty understand one another and work together? And what potentially is your experience there with how assessments can make your work as a coach more impactful working with chairs?
So I love this discussion on the different different types of faculty and staff. And it's funny that we got to this discussion point, because that was actually something where there was a great bit of unrest when I came into my position. It was tension between our tenure line faculty members, or our tenured faculty members, and what we call our term faculty members are teaching. And it was almost like there was a complete misunderstanding about the strengths of both roles, right? So, I have certifications across multiple assessments, and there's one assessment in particular that I love to use in situations, where you do have some distinct differences, and that's Gallup Strengths, Global Strengths, Strengths Finder, under a couple of different names, and that really helps you understand your faculty individually and what their strengths are. And I think it also, gives you a great team picture. So what do we look like individually as a group? And then what do we look like as a faculty or a department as a group or as a team? And so I think that's a great tool, a great assessment to use to build from strengths, right? Rather than weaknesses, and focus on, what are our inherent strengths? What can we tap into that's already inherent or natural to us? But I think that assessment in particular, because, when we talk about the differences between term faculty and tenure line faculty, tenure line faculty, our promotion and tenure system, for the most part, I believe across most universities, is very individualistic. It doesn't really encourage teamwork necessarily. Whereas I think most term faculty are all about what can we do for students, what can we do for our program, and are very much more team focused. And so I think that assessment in particular allows you to move in both directions. How can we grow as individuals? How can we also grow as a team? How can we tap into our strengths so that we don't exhaust one another? And so I think using an assessment to kind of give you a talking point, or look at all of these great strengths that you have, and it kind of gives you somewhere to move from there, at least to build a cadence or like some comfort between one another.
Yeah. And so I am not DISC certified or Gallup Strengths. I have not used those official assessments in either with my faculty or with my department or with my coaching clients. What I do know is that coaches have a pretty big tool bag of assessments tools to use with coaching clients. And I think that pulling out some of those tools that allow clients to really get some clarity on their own strengths and on what other people may be thinking and feeling and operating under, that kind of tool or reflection tool, those things can be super helpful both for the working with the department head coaching client directly, and in helping them do their job with their faculty members, with their stakeholders.
So the switch from, especially for those leaders who emerge from the faculty, from the tenure track faculty, the switch from focusing on themselves, more or less, on their career, their advancement, their research, and so forth, all of a sudden they have people in their charge and they have to focus on them. And of course, good leadership versus management is you should be supporting them and you should be coming last almost, which of course you can't because you still have a certain roles and responsibilities. But the awareness that you have to learn and have to gain is about the different priorities. And as you said, Whitney, to grow both as individuals, but also as teams. Whereas, of course, in departments, a lot of times you don't really have teams. I mean, you have work groups, you have
Mhm.
people that kind of do the same thing, but have different individual priorities.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you real quick, we haven't really mentioned staff here. Is there something that comes to mind when you think about working with staff as chairs and then with coaches helping chairs work with staff?
Mhm. They are definitely part of the stakeholders of the college and the university and the department. My department has one staff member, but I work very closely with staff members out of the dean's office. There's definitely a team mindset of pulling in staff to the equation. And I think that it's kind of the same thing. You still need to do a lot of listening. And one big difference from being a department member to being a department head is just the supervisory level of responsibilities that you have. By and large, those duties, what you're doing in terms of supervision of employees all across the spectrum of different roles and responsibilities, is invisible to others. First of all, it's about 80% of my job. And second of all, if other people are seeing me doing supervision of individuals in the department, I'm doing something wrong, because I should not be publicly talking about supervision stuff. And it's very one-on-one and it's very hidden. So one tussle, one challenge point is in how invisible much my work is. And part of that is also the supervision of working with staff. So, but again, I use my listening skills quite a bit, because I value talking with staff very clearly, listening to what their challenges are. They are very attuned to the power differences across different groups of faculty. They are very attuned to the different power structures. They are very aware of how much they do to keep this place running. And so, people know this stuff. They see it, and I think it helps when they feel recognized. So
Yeah, I fully agree. And I also think the duties and the expectations for our staff members have changed vastly since I've been chair. It used to be that, help with course scheduling, answer the phone. We're not even anywhere in that space anymore. And so there's so much more. We have 2 staff members in the department that I lead. And one of the first things I did was to make sure they come to our meetings as a voice, not just a note taker, because they often have the most holistic picture of what's going on in the department. And sometimes, depending on, I've had many different, administrators or staff members over the years. Sometimes they're who folks go to voice frustrations, whether it's students or other faculty members. And so sometimes I joke, because I say, really our 2 staff members are the boss of all of us, the bosses of all of us. They, but I will say the first time, the first staff member I worked with, and I verbally asked her for her opinion one day, and she started crying because no one had ever asked her what her opinion was before. And she said, I so much appreciate the fact that you value my perspective. And so that's really, what I've tried to do with all of our staff over the years, but then also to recognize that, in addition to all of the things I just mentioned, they also want growth opportunities. And so those might look different. And so we talk through those things. But there are often differences between expectations, the way we evaluate faculty and staff in regard to dispositions or in regard to ratings that we give them. There are often things that are allowed for faculty and not for staff, I think about my own university. Wonderful. But for faculty, I can give an excellent rating using a rubric and no additional explanation. For a staff member, there's extra process. There's an additional process if I want to give an exceptional rating. And so the 2 evaluation systems are built differently. And that often is something that it can be unmotivating, for staff.
So are you saying that at colleges and universities, there's systems that are just nonsensical and they don't necessarily work and talk to each other? I'm kidding. Obviously. But I'm really glad that you brought you both brought up the idea of staff being somewhat underappreciated. I think just like the chair's role in and of itself is often underappreciated for its complexity, I'm really glad you both mentioned the pivotal role that staff have in the operations and the inner workings of our departments.
Yeah. And I would add also that there are, in our college, in our university, they're professional faculty, but they're professional staff, the advisors, the student advisors, the folks who have the most contact with students navigating through their programs, need to be pulled in and coordinated with and checked in with a lot more often than people think. So they're a very important role. So and often, faculty are sort of working in their own purview. They're responsible for curriculum. They're responsible for making sure that the programs get designed, that the courses get designed. And then you need to have the step of the advisors built into that process, because they are very literally on the ground with students, helping them navigate these programs. But like staff, they're often sort of isolated by themselves and not coordinated with.
So I think by now it's clear to anybody who hasn't worked with chairs how diverse the stakeholder group is that chairs have to kind of coordinate and work with. And we mentioned that earlier, this idea of managing horizontally and vertically, which is really tricky. So what I'm hearing from both of you, really, what's at the center of it all is communication, which also includes being a translator of sorts between different needs of expectations. Then there's transparency. And then there is, and I think this allows us to come full circle to a topic that we touched on earlier in our conversation, that is the question of trust. Because there is a lot of times there is not a whole lot of trust, not just within the department, but also between the department and leadership and between different groups and stakeholders within the department.
Yeah, it's so important. And building trust takes time. It's not a, here, if I do this one thing, voila, solve the problem. It takes time. It takes different amounts of time with different people who have different perspectives and different understandings of things. One thing that's also different about my job is that I'm not a permanent chair. So the model that the college has chosen is that chairs are hired for 3, maybe 5 years. So you start with 3, and then maybe you can continue another couple of years. So part of it is also building the culture and understanding and the trust that, okay, it's me now. It's going to be one of y'all later. So, how do we come together as a team to sort of support each other in this whole process? Some of the coaching strategies that I use in my daily job are asking questions early and often. Some of the same things that Whitney was mentioning, and intentionally celebrating our successes. So we have come so far. I am so proud of them. And where we are now, 2.5 years later, is such a different place than where we were when I started. We're not done. There's going to be work to do in perpetuity. But we have also come so far and done so much. And we're operating at such a different level of oneness and feeling like a department than we did when we started as 6 or 7 different programs. So, and really a lot of what chairs need to know and what coaches can help them realize is developing your 360 view and being able to hold the perspectives of multiple people in your hands and being the person who can come in and connect the pieces for folks. So it's very different from the typical faculty perspective of expertise. Here's what I know. Whether you're an instructor or a tenure line person, you know things. And it's very different from advocating for your expertise and what you know than it is connecting the dots between different groups. So, and that helps build trust also, of having you being the person out there who's advocating for connecting everything.
Yeah.
Well, any kind of change takes time anyway. So speaking of time, to wrap up our conversation for today, I'm wondering if you could redesign the onboarding experience for new chairs, let's just say for the first 6 or 12 months, What would that look like? What would make a real impact? And how does coaching come into this?
Yeah. I have so many thoughts about this. I think an ideal model is one that combines a cohort who meet regularly throughout the year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. So with specific topics that you visit like every month. So there's official like materials that you're reflecting on and reading and thinking about. You're learning things, professional development. You're doing it in a community. And then there's a level of group coaching plus one-on-one coaching throughout the year. So it's a combination of coaching, both one-on-one and in group, and a combination of consultative kinds of things, giving chairs the tools that they need to do their job. So
Yeah, I think those are all great ideas. I think too, when I think about chair development in a holistic sense, it's not just the onboarding, but it's like the ongoing training of, a year one, a year two chair's needs are going to be very different, I would assume, than in year 9 or year 10. I think we have someone at our university is going into 20 years, and I'm like fascinated. That stamina, and the level of resilience, I think that would require. And so, I mean, I think so two things. Ask what folks need, right? And then you can build your cohorts around that, or you can build your programming around that. But just simply reach out and ask. And I think also, so that it has two aspects to it. Often, I think like creating greater understandings about policies that impact faculty that upper administration needs you to convey as a chair are clouded, I think, with development or onboarding. And in my experience, certainly the business world has in many ways embraced coaching and has normalized it as a development practice, whereas I think the academic setting has been more slow to embracing coaching. And I think we have made inroads in upper level leadership, it becoming more normal. But it is not normal for middle leaders because, of course, that requires increased resources. And so I think often if chairs ask for coaching, or if they are put into a mandatory coaching relationship, it's mostly, from the being put in that situation is from a punitive perspective, and from an asking perspective, it's like, oh, you're doing fine. You don't need coaching, because of just a misunderstanding about what coaching is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, what folks in higher ed understand is more the consulting model of like, go to an expert and they'll tell you what to do. And coaching is not that. And I think any academic benefits from coaching. Faculty benefit from coaching too, and just figuring out how to maintain the eye on the prize of tenure, and do what they need to do to get there and figure out what kinds of career they want to lead while they're doing that and after that. I think coaching is something that leads folks to curiosity and clarity, which is not the same as consulting. Consulting is looking for expert input to figure out what the right answer is, what you need to do. And coaching is much more individually oriented towards, I'm curious what's going on, and just clarity about different choices that are available to you and where you could possibly hit. It's not telling you what the right answer is. And that's where I think that coaching has a ways to go within higher ed. It's just understanding what it can bring to the table.
And what's so ironic is often the argument is there's no money for coaching, but strangely enough, there's money for consulting. And what consulting firms charge is exponentially higher than what a coaching program would cost. So I think it's just reshuffling priorities in the way, college leaders or university leaders look at how best to use budget for ongoing professional development. I think that is definitely one of those things where coaches, when working with those leaders, can definitely have an impact as well. Listen, thank you both so very much for your time, for your invaluable insights. This was a fantastic conversation. This is also a topic that's very near and dear to me because I've worked with a lot of department chairs. So this has been wonderful, but I still learn a lot from you today. So thank you for being here today and for sharing your journey and your expertise with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
And to our audience, thank you for spending some time with us today. We hope that you found some real value in the discussion and gained some insights into the complexities of working with college university department chairs. As always, for more information on this episode, on our two guests, and on the topic, please visit the companion site, which is higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. See you again soon. And until then, keep making a difference, one client and one conversation at a time. Take care.